Everybody, it's Mike with On Point Preparedness. Wanted to do a follow-up with regards to the situation and everything regarding this disease as well as its impact. We sort of have a crisis within a crisis. I promised you I wanted to follow up on some news articles, but more so than that, I wanted to focus on some aspects of preparedness, some aspects that are critically important, I believe. The tone has just been changing rapidly. I mean, as you all know, the tone has been changing just dramatically, week by week by week. This virus is really just spreading very quickly, and I do believe it's a real virus, as I've said before. At this point, it's just so widespread across the globe, and there are so many scientists and researchers and doctors involved, and tests going out. That it's hard to say that it's not a real threat. In fact, as you start to look at the official numbers coming out from agencies like WHO and things like that have concealed things before and will likely still conceal things, the numbers that they're giving are not good. So, for instance, a 3.4% mortality rate, which is what the WHO just revised it to. Keep in mind, in areas like Italy and other places, it's as high as like 5% or more. But for WHO to come out and say a 3.4%, as well as you have an infection rate of this virus being much, much more than flu. This value called an R naught, which is right now between like 4 and 7. It's anywhere in between there, depending on which region you're looking at. This thing is highly infectious. This thing is really just look at the maps. Just look at the maps at how fast this has gone cross-continent and cross-country. It's definitely a real virus. And it's a little bit disheartening to see that the truther community really just want to be polarized in their view. I keep on seeing, people saying, the virus really isn't a threat. The virus isn't a threat. This is really for global vaccination. Or the virus really isn't a threat. This is for cashless society. I'm going to show you some of those articles as well, right? Where they're saying that we're going to quarantine cash. There really isn't a threat from the virus. This is just the beast system. Or, it's not the virus, it's 5G, or it's not the virus. Let me make this clear, right? We have a crisis within a crisis, or multiple crises within a crisis. I just don't understand why people want to belittle, the virus and say that it's not a threat at all, and this is just hype. Typically, that's what you're getting a lot from people who, watch the media. I covered this in my last video. I said, the boy that cried wolf. The media has always cried wolf. Wolf, 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 wolf. And now, when it legitimately looks like there's a wolf, it's just very disheartening to look at social media, particularly Facebook, when a local news source or a national news source puts out an article talking about this virus, that you have the masses saying, typical media hype, go tell me about the next chemical attack, yada, 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 yada. And people are just passing it off, or at least they were. Now you actually are starting to see people respond a little bit more in terms of boots on the ground. People are, putting money where their mouth is, and they're going out and raiding stores, as you've seen in Hawaii, as well as Washington State, probably now in New York. It's it's sort of silly. There's some memes flying around right now, but it is beyond me as to why people are prepping toilet paper and bottled water. I mean, hey, bottled water, storing bottled water, that's good, right? I don't have a problem with that. But seeing a rush on bottled water due to this pandemic, when the taps are still running fine, it doesn't make that much sense. And so I put a Facebook post out just recently. I went to Costco just to get some things for ourselves, and it was sort of like Black Friday. Again, this is in Ohio. This is where we don't have any confirmed cases, not because we don't have any cases, but because Ohio is one of the last 6 states to actually do in-house testing. We should be able to have in-house testing by the end of this week, but still, we're sending samples to the CDC, which is now having a week turnaround time. So, of course, we don't have cases. But again, all intents and purposes, Ohio doesn't have any cases. And so I go to an Ohio Costco and toilet paper is completely out. And people are, just getting tons of bottled water and they're not stocking up on food. And I'm like, that you're not going to need toilet paper if you're starving to death. It's biology, right? You're not going to have a need for it. So it is beyond me as to why public is panicking about getting toilet paper when you should really be getting your essentials of food and other things like that. Water is good too, right? But there's better ways to prepare with water than buying the cases of bottles. You can go to Kroger's and get the 5-gallon jugs that they use for those standalone water dispensers. That's a lot better. Or even just buy an actual 55-gallon water container on Craigslist, or if you don't feel comfortable on Craigslist, buying those food grade water containers, just go and buy one on one of these emergency prep stores. Or like $50 to $100 depending on where you go. It's just a better way. But why people are just panicking over toilet paper and water is beyond me. But use it to your advantage. For a lot of people that are doing that type of prepping in ignorance, you yourself, as well as me, stay a step ahead. So I have a pretty clean conscience, and I'm so glad that I put out some of my prepping videos before some of this stuff happened, right? So, I was telling you, go to your Home Depot, go to your Lowe's, and get a mask. The masks that are at Walmart and Walgreens and everything like that really don't even do that much. They're just sort of the surgical masks. Those were already sold out, but there's still time. And it was like less than a week later, then they're all gone. Or similarly, when not just me, I'm not tooting my own horn here. A lot of the truther channels out there that are also into prepping, they've been saying it too. Get what you need in terms of hand sanitizer and disinfectants and everything like that. And so I stocked up a little bit extra on a Friday. By Monday, everything's out. And so I just really want you to be aware the situation right now is so dynamic that it can just change like that. It's pretty phenomenal, especially when I'm not even in a highly impacted region. I'd really be interested in hearing some of the people from Washington State, hearing your perspectives. I do have a couple of friends of mine that are in some Facebook groups, and they have been sharing local articles and local perspectives on what's going on there, and it's definitely even worse. And so we wanna stay ahead of this as much as possible. And so while the world in its panic buying, and I think this is okay, Hawaii, anyone from Hawaii, you guys started this. Hawaii was the first people that started to rush out and get toilet paper, and then that news went viral, and then everyone started stocking up on toilet paper. So I don't know what's going on in Hawaii, but you guys started it. Hey, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. But again, while everyone's sort of going towards those things, the interesting thing that I just noticed at Costco is no one was prepping on the food. And also, people were buying the Clorox wipes. They're buying, the specific disinfectants. But no one was really buying the base essentials. Like the Clorox, the bleach itself was fully stocked. For some reason, people weren't going after that. They were just going after like the nice convenient Clorox wipes. In Kroger's or Walmart, of course, the hand sanitizer is completely out. But I went to the first aid aisle, and 70% isopropyl alcohol, which if you've been following some of the prepping videos that I've been talking about, fully stocked. And so, you should be grabbing that up. People are going to get wise on these things, and so you should try to get them now. I think you can still get that. Hydrogen peroxide, 70% isopropyl alcohol, get those before people get wise, about the hand sanitizers being run out. And get those things if you haven't already. There's been people that I've been warning for years, right, to really set aside some preps. But even now, right, even before the panic really hit the streets, I've been telling you, you need to get something. And now I have people panicking Friends of mine are panicking and they're calling me saying, what do I do? What do I do? I was like, for instance, someone called me, very panicky saying, okay, where do you buy survival food? You need to tell me where you buy survival food. I was like, they're out. they're out. Your best bet is just to go to Costco and buy, because it really doesn't even need to have a long shelf life at this point. Forget the 25-year shelf life. Canned goods that have a 2-year shelf life, that's a reasonable amount of time considering the situation that we're in. Just go to Costco, go to Kroger's, go to Walmart. But again, just because, people never thought it was going to happen, never thought. Now it's here. Now you're panicking. And again, right, as I've been trying to say, we're not to be slaves to fear. But if you neglect the signs and the warnings out there, you're gonna potentially lead yourself into fear. Because you'll realize that, I was wrong and I should have done at least something, right? Just at least something. Even if, I know a lot of people are hard on income, even if you do just a little bit over a long period of time, it's something, right? It's something rather than, having the means and not doing anything. So, again, I still think there's time to prepare. I still think there's an ability to get disinfectants. You just have to look the right way. Don't go for the pre-configured package, nice consumer good wipes and things like that. Just go for the raw. Go for the raw Clorox. Go for the raw isopropyl alcohol, the raw hydrogen peroxide. Those things seem to be still there. Think about different stores, right? Costco may not be your best bet, but you may be able to still find some of these things in an Ace Hardware store, in some of the other hardware stores like Lowe's and Home Depot. You still might be able to find some of those things. So you got to get creative. If you still don't have what you need, figuring out where the best places are to buy. But let me go ahead, and I want to touch a little bit on the news and just show you some of the things that I'm aware about. But really, the key thing that I wanted to share in this video was travel planning. Travel planning is a critical thing, and I'll tell you why as it applies to this specific crisis. But travel planning and communication, these are things that I think are woefully neglected by people that are preparing. And so I'm going to share with you a very wonderful and free way to get prepped on the travel planning towards the end of this live stream. And I just think it's going to be a tremendous help for you. And I think it will also help not only alleviate some of your fears, but also just you may find it interesting. You may have never even thought about these things in terms of travel planning before. So let me go ahead and just share some of the news articles just to start. So I just want to start on Drudge. Many of you guys are already on Drudge Report, so you've seen some of these. But particularly, one I wanted to just highlight, you get some weird things where China quarantine hotel collapses. You wonder if that was an accident or not, considering everything that we've seen out of China. But, big movements from government, right? So the media that cried wolf, I've been saying it. Forget about what the media is doing. Because, the media has always cried wolf. And so now that they're crying wolf again, is it really a wolf or is there not? Well, don't look at the media. Look at what the governments are doing. Israel quarantined about 80,000 people. Israel told all their citizens that they shouldn't travel abroad. China shut down schools nationwide. Japan shut down schools nationwide. Daegu in South Korea shut down schools all in the city. Iran, I'm sure, is shutting down schools. Italy has now restricted or quarantined a quarter of the population. You've got these quarantine mechanisms happening all around the world. And so, yes, governments aren't necessarily trustworthy. But you also have to understand that, right, that the governments are about money, they're about economics, they're about self-interest, and shutting down businesses and things like that, it's not good for business. So they're doing it for a reason. And so, forget what the media is doing. Look at what the governments are doing, or in some cases here in the U.S., the lack thereof. But look at what they're doing. We have not really seen this type of response before. And so there's definitely something going on here. Again, in America, I highlighted this quite a while ago. We've only tested, CDC has only tested about 1,500, 1,600 people. And so, yeah, there's lots of contradicting statements. Again, that's another thing. Sorry I'm digressing all over the place. But, I was mentioning how people say, oh, it's not a virus, it's 5G. Oh, it's not a virus, this is global vaccines. Oh, it's not a virus, it's this. Oh, it's not, Or there is a virus and it's really not that worrisome. They're just blowing it out of proportion so they can do X, Y, and Z. Another one of these arguments is there's really no virus, or there is a virus and it's very minimal, but this is politics. This is just sniffles. It's something just like the flu or the cold, and it's the Democrats trying to take down Trump that are really, hyping this up. Stop. All of these things have to stop. And you really have to look at the data coming out from a wide range of scientific resources. This is a legitimate virus. And there's just many reports out there where you combine the infection rate, which is extremely high, and you combine that with the mortality that we're seeing, which is ranging anywhere from 2 to 5+%. And again, are those numbers even really true? We have no idea. And that doesn't even include the critical cases. And it also does not include when it starts to spread to regions that don't have great health care, like India or within Africa. I mean, there's going to be just a huge impact on mortality rate when it starts to go into places that don't have hospital care. This is a legitimate thing. And so I really just encourage people to not tamp this down as saying it's not a serious virus, it's X, Y, or Z. Yeah, it's X, Y, and Z. There's definitely politics involved. There's definitely probably components of a global vaccine involved. There's definitely a push for a cashless society. That's one of the other articles here. Where is it? Here we go. Is this it? No. Here. The Fed is quarantining cash from China to spread coronavirus. And there's other things about how cash is bad, could have germs, all this stuff. And so, yeah, there's an agenda to try to get us to the cashless society. And there's, I'm sure there's an agenda for 5G as well. There's all these legitimate things that are happening. But for some reason, a lot of people just want to polarize to one of these X, Y's, and Z's and just say that there's really nothing going on with the virus and to not really pay any attention to it. And I think that's just a wrong approach. Personal opinion, but I just think it's a wrong approach. Let's see, going down through some of these other articles, is there any others? Yeah, shoppers throwing punches over toilet paper again, things like that. We're not even like in the heat of this here in the United States. I think this is pretty much expected with everything that we've seen from Black Fridays and people fighting over non-essentials. And then once something serious happens and there's legitimate needs, there's going to be a really terrible human response to all of this. Now, keep in mind, this is over toilet paper. Again, that's unessential. Imagine when the food stores or the food in the stores starts to go bare. That's going to be ugly. And I mean, people that have been preparing have been warning about this for quite a while. And we're starting to see, the deconstruction of a lot of society constraints, if you will. People are sort of constrained by the law. People are sort of constrained by just, morality in a sense of that because there's civil law. But then once the tensions get high enough, those things sort of go out the window. And so some of the really unfortunate things that have been happening, especially in Washington State, perhaps you've seen this article, is where there were, people thought that this could only happen in China, because there was videos of disgruntled people in China that were spitting. Maybe you've seen it. They were spitting on door handles and they were spitting on elevator buttons and doing all these things because they were perhaps infected and they couldn't get treatment. So they're saying, hey, I'm going to take everyone else down with me. Well, oh, that's China. It could never happen here in the U.S. Well, guess what? Happened in Washington State. There were reports, I think this was on Drudge a couple days ago. There were people that tried to get tested. And I was mentioning this. You have to look at the CDC guidelines on who can be tested. You had to have travel history, and if you didn't have travel history, they revised it to where you have to be in the latter stages of the disease, which is active pneumonia. Those are pretty much the only ways you can get tested. So naturally, when there are people coming in with mild respiratory distress and fever and didn't have travel history to China, they were trying to get tested, and because there's not a whole lot of tests, and because they didn't meet the CDC criteria, doctors and nurses were telling people, sorry, we can't test you. We've even been in contact with our state healthcare representatives, and they're saying that they can't give you a test. So naturally, people were furious. They started throwing their dirty masks at the nurses. They started spitting at people. They started spitting on the doorknobs. Everything that you've seen in China, people are doing here in the United States. And that's because of just disorganization, fear, lawlessness, just human nature. And again, we need to be prudent. We need to see that these things are on the horizon, and we need to practically prepare so we're just not a part of that. Just don't want to be having any part of that whatsoever. So yeah, lots and lots of news going on. I think here in the U.S., which is a lot of my viewership, it's going to be like 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Remember, when we started seeing South Korea, and no one's really doubting that South Korea is doing an amazing job in terms of testing. You don't even have to have symptoms. And they actually have drive-through testing now, where you just get in your car and you pull up to a site and they test you. You don't have to pay out of pocket. That's another big question in the United States. There were some reporters who were asking Vice President Pence, do you have to be insured in order to get a test? And they wouldn't answer the question. So I don't know what's up with that. But in South Korea, you don't have to have any proof of medical insurance or anything like that. Just drive up, they'll test you, give some contact information, and they'll notify you of the details. They're testing tons and tons of people. And what did we see in South Korea? We saw that they had a handful of cases, and then within a week, that exploded to several hundred. If you watch Peak Prosperity, that's a channel that I have been frequenting pretty often right now for news, and I'm very much on the same page with him in terms of everything that he's presented. He uses this analogy of case, cluster, cluster, boom, where basically we don't have really a linear progression of cases. It is more so that you have a very flat line because of the incubation period of this, because of the lack of testing, et cetera, and then you have an exponential rise right at the very end. And the United States, make no question about it, we are probably about 2 weeks from starting to see that exponential rise. I think the only thing that will halt that exponential rise is what happens with the disposition of these test kits. Are the validation errors going to be fixed? Are they really going to be sending them out? I don't know. We'll have to see what happens with that. Again, I thought it was very interesting when we had only tested under 500 people, and Pence came out and said that we would have 1 million by the end of the week. I knew that wasn't going to pan out, and sure enough, it was actually a nice bit of truth and honesty. He said, yeah, we've drastically missed that mark as well. And you just can't do that. You just can't fix your validation errors and pump out 1 million test kits in a week. Again, I've worked in pharmaceuticals. I work in OTC drugs. I've worked in manufacturing and R&D. It just doesn't happen. I was way overpromised. But again, I'm a political atheist, if you want to use that name, in terms of this secularism. I really, if I had to vote, I vote Republican. I'm very conservative in terms of my views, socially and fiscally. Definitely not a Democrat. But people will take a lot of what I'm saying as, just being critical of Republicans and being critical of the president. I just call a spade a spade. Anywho, let's take a look at some other news before I start to get into some of the preps. This I found to be a very interesting story. Right now, China is saying, hey, because of our quarantine measures, the cases are stopping. We really don't have any new cases. We're going to start sending people back to work. If you've seen this, interestingly, they have a lot of whistleblowers that are saying that China is actually trying to modify their electric consumption levels by ordering companies to leave their lights on, leave their machinery on, just to drive the numbers up. I think it was Peak Prosperity that actually recognized this, that if you look on windy.com or other environmental websites and you look over China compared to historical figures, China was extremely polluted. I mean, you go there, there's smog, you can't even see the sky. If you look on windy.com, it's clear blue skies, which means manufacturing is way down. If you look at the environmental pollutants, they're very, very low, which shows that manufacturing has not really returned. If you look at travel patterns and everything like that, China's being exposed. They're really not producing anything. And so they're trying to, falsify this now by telling their companies just to, a couple people go in there and just use as much electricity as you can so it can look like we're producing things. But again, this is hitting the docks. I don't have the video pulled up right now, but there's a truck driver. It was a viral video. There's a truck driver who frequents one of these shipping docks. I don't know if it's on the East or West Coast, but this individual was absolutely freaked out and decided to record it because she said the entire shipping dock in the whole 20-some years she's been a truck driver has always been, say, maybe 15 crates tall, and the entire dock has been lined with them. And the video that she was showing was maybe like 80% lower than that. And she said, this is absolutely astonishing. And she said, America, everything that you get overseas, it's not coming. And in fact, we've seen those warnings, right? We've seen warnings from a lot of the commercial manufacturers that they're going to run out of particular items. Personally, cheap Chinese plastic goods, I am so happy that those things aren't coming over here anymore. But there's also, a lot of pharmaceutical ingredients. We've seen that India stopped the export of nearly 25 active pharmaceutical ingredients, which includes acetaminophen. So I'll tell you what, because acetaminophen reduces fevers as well as naproxen and ibuprofen and things like that, not everyone can take ibuprofen and naproxen, especially pregnant ladies. That's been associated with miscarriage. If you're pregnant, you're typically taking acetaminophen, or there's some other names for it, like paracetamol or APAP. The intermediates to make acetaminophen come from China. India can't get those anymore. India makes 60% of the world's acetaminophen. For national security measures, they're not shipping that out anymore. So, if you're pregnant and, you want fever reducers on hand, because again, we're dealing with a virus that, that causes fever, even outside of the virus, right? You want to have some on hand. I suggest, before this really starts to get out in the public, right? Because I think people that are really in the know right now and aren't really discounting this whole thing, they're really not stocking up on that yet. Go get yourself some acetaminophen. Go look at the list of things that India is now banning export of for national security reasons. There's a whole ton of antibiotics in there. Again, acetaminophen and some other things. So antibiotics, I know some of you are storing up on those as well. If there's some way that you can get a hold of some, that's probably another thing you should probably be prepping on. But major things going on. And again, this recovery or the crisis in China is gone does not seem like that at all. And there's still whistleblowers coming out from China saying, no, there's still a whole bunch of cases. They just can't really contain this thing. It's just so infectious. Moving on. This will be the last This will be the last article of news that I want to share with you, and then I'll get into the preps. And this article particularly relates to the preps that I want to share with you all. So this is in California. Police enforce quarantine on residential block after a man dies of the virus. Basically, what happened is that the authorities wouldn't release exactly what happened, but this news agency found out that a 71-year-old man had died of the virus on Wednesday and lived in this particular neighborhood. Therefore, the health official, it says somewhere in here, one of the health officials for the state contacted the police department and ordered them to quarantine off this entire block. I think this is a little bit creepy here. Quote, head back inside, a sheriff deputy ordered residents via loudspeaker when people started poking their heads out to investigate the chaos happening on their street. It doesn't really give a whole lot of information other than that, except for there was a person that died of the virus. They lived in this block. A health official for California called the police and told them to quarantine off the block. It's sort of interesting. Who knows if this person even had contact with people on the block? I don't even know some of my neighbors that live 5 doors down. Never seen them, never conversed with them, never had contact with them, but yet they're quarantining off an entire block. I mean, did these people look at what facilities this person frequented over his life? Did they quarantine off? He's 70 years old, so he's probably not working, but did they go to a workstation? It's a very odd thing for them to be quarantining off an entire neighborhood when most neighbors, if you're 5, 6, 7 houses down, you have zero contact pretty much, except for maybe passing each other on the street in your car. But still, a very panic reactive based measure where now you have civil authorities and police, they're telling you can't leave your house. I have no idea what the details are on this story. How long are the police going to go there? I don't know. Are you allowed to leave your house to get food? I don't know. I mean, heck, people were just popping their heads out of their doors and they're telling them to get back inside via loudspeaker. Not the best place to be, okay? And we've seen quarantine measures, as we just looked on Drudge Report. Italy just quarantined a quarter of their population. China quarantined the entire nation. You got quarantines going on everywhere. Some of them more draconian than others, where some of them are like sort of self-imposed quarantines, like please stay in your house, but they were still allowing you to go get groceries. We saw some of that coming out of Wuhan until they still couldn't contain the spread, so it was actually like mandated or you'll be arrested. There's various levels of quarantine going on here, but some of these more draconian ones, that's may not be a good place to be in, because you're sort of at the mercy, right? You don't know what's gonna happen. Okay, so I'm all prepped, I'm bugging in, that's great. What happens from here on out? I don't know. That's just a weird place to be. And I don't have any answers for you because we don't know exactly how this is going to happen. But in Trump's first coronavirus, whatever you want to call it, his speech that he gave on it, one of the reporters asked, are you looking to enact measures much like China in terms of quarantining entire cities? And his response was something to the effect of, we're looking at that as a possibility. We're really not leaving anything by the wayside. And so it could happen. It could happen where they quarantine an entire city. Well, what does that look like? Are you okay to stay in the city or are you not? That's a personal decision that you're going to have to make. But if you don't want to be in the city or you don't want to be in a particular area that comes under a draconian quarantine, what exactly do you do? And I just want to give a little bit of perspective here. So I'm actually going to switch off of this screen. So Google Maps. I just want to highlight this in case you're not aware of it. Google Maps, we're all using Google Maps. Whether you're an Android user or you're an iPhone user, pretty much everyone has it on their phone. Now, even though you may not be actively using Google Maps on your phone, it is still very much tracking you. And I don't mean to say that from a conspiratorial perspective. I mean, it's tracking you. That's in the fine print. What they use the tracking data for primarily is for Google Maps. Some of us are astonished at how Google Maps can pinpoint and be relatively accurate within like a couple minutes, how fast we're going to get to our destination, because it's anticipating certain slowdowns on the highways or the streets. Well, how does it know? How does Google know that there's a slowdown at this intersection or there's a slowdown at this particular roadway? It's because they're continuously in real time collecting data from people's phones. And so if there's like 10 people that have their phones on that are all stopped at an intersection because there's an accident, that feeds into the Google databases and transmits to all our phones and shows up as a little red bar on, that roadway. That's primarily what they're using the data for. Now, okay, that doesn't sound too bad. It's actually pretty useful. However, pretty sure that, if we're in a situation where there's a draconian quarantine, right? A very serious quarantine, I'm pretty sure the government would have access to Google databases. How hard would it be to say that this area is quarantined and you set a border around it? You can find people going in and out of that restricted zone. Pretty easy. I mean, if we can use Google Maps and accurately talk about our travel plans down to about 3 minutes, and they're feeding that real-time information in order to get those travel times and those red, yellow, green bars on the map, odds are pretty easy that they would be able to see who's violating a particular, border or quarantine border. So, these are things you need to think about. Again, really don't want to stoke fear, but just think about it. If you do want to get out of an area, and again, I'm not recommending that if you're sick, you leave type of thing. We do want to obey authorities. That's our Christian duty. But again, sometimes when we see danger ahead, the prudent man hides himself and, shuns away from that rather than suffer on for it. I would not recommend that you have your phone on. You should turn your phone off. And if your phone is off, do you have a means to figure out where the heck you're going? A lot of people would say, okay, well, I'm going to buy some travel maps and things like that. But in all honesty, that can get a little bit cumbersome, especially if you're not used to them. That adds to transaction time. You're not going to be very efficient with some of these big, huge atlas maps. Again, they're really not that hard to read once you find the right page. But if you're not used to how they're indexed, and how to flip through all those, you're not going to be very efficient with it. You may get confused. It's not a bad thing to have the paper maps. But again, what are you going to do in a situation like that? Or maybe just forget about the quarantine aspect. What if there was articles on Drudge as well, which I thought were sort of silly. They said, with basically so many people off of work and at home, could the internet be strained because of just the influx or the volume of people using the internet capacity? Possibly, but internet going down is another thing that we think about and we prep for. So what if the internet does go down and you need to travel? How are you gonna get there without your Google Maps? Well, I'm going to give you a solution. I'm going to give you a very good solution that I personally think is, in some ways, a little bit better than paper atlas maps. So, this is free. This is free too. Takes a little bit of know-how, not very much, but it's free. So let's go ahead and take a look at what I wanted to show you. There is a free software called Basecamp from Garmin, the maker of many of your GPS units for either sports and fitness, outdoor recreation, automotive, marine, etc., etc. This is what the software looks like. Again, it is free. Now, Garmin offers the software itself, but then you have to buy Garmin maps for it to actually work. So you just get the software, and the only thing it pretty much has on it is major interstates. It has no local roads, no topography, nothing. It's bare bones. And then, depending on what you want, if you want topography because you're hiking, or if you want routable roads because you're taking a trip, each one of those is going to cost some moolah. You've got to spend $60 for the road maps. You've got to spend anywhere from $80 to $100 for different sections of the United States, for hiking maps. And so it can add up to several $100s if you buy the maps directly from Garmin. However, there is a free way. It's not illegal. It's completely free. Tons of people that are enthusiasts in terms of hiking and everything like that, they do this all the time. Again, go to, let me pull it up here. Go to Garmin.com, or you can just do a Google search and look up Garmin Basecamp. Down here, you can download it for Windows or Macintosh. Okay, that just gets you the base software here. Now, you need to add different maps. So, what you can do is head on over to a place called GPS File Depot. These are all open source free maps, very good quality maps for every single purpose that you need, whether it's traveling on the road or whether it's hiking, etc. It's international. I mean, look at all the countries here. International maps. Everything your heart desires. Or, specifically with the states, you can choose your particular state. For me, I would really recommend that you get something broader. There's actually the United States topographical routable maps, where it will give you various segments, right? So you can download the entire Midwest, the entire South Central, South Atlantic. I actually got all 4 of these. Just because I'm sort of situated sort of right here in the middle, and I got family over here. So I downloaded 4 of these. Really don't have any anticipation of going out this way, but now I've got pretty much Google Maps in my pocket that I can retrieve offline. I don't need to be connected to the internet. This is on my computer. I've put it on my desktop computer, but more importantly, if you have a laptop, you put it on your laptop computer. And so if you have a means to charge your laptop, either in your car or as you go on the road, maybe you've bought some solar panels, you literally have Google Maps, and you can be very efficient with how you use the software because you're so used to already being in that type of matrix, right? We're very used to how Google Maps operates, and this is no different, right? So the same type of zoom in, the same type of setting your waypoints. If I wanted to look at Indianapolis, right? So I can scroll on into Indianapolis, and it's just like Google Maps. It's absolutely, well, not absolutely no different, but I mean, you get the point, right? You can do routes, you can do waypoints, you can save things, and the best thing is it's all off of the internet. Now, again, this is, you can see up here, I've loaded some of my maps. I get those 4. So these 4 topographical road maps where I can set waypoints, and I can actually show you here. I could just say, well, I want to go from here to there. Show me the best route. So there we go. I got one different route. And you can change these accordingly with how you want to go. But very easy to use. There's a lot of YouTube tutorials on how to install this and how to install the maps. I was able to do all of this within maybe 15 minutes. And incredibly helpful, I think. And not just for this particular situation, although, hopefully you see some of the risks there with how governments have been behaving, and some of the risks of using your phone. But even outside of that, it's just a very good thing to have regardless, just because of, whether the internet goes down or anything like that. But let me go back here and just show you here that go back to this main site here. Yeah, if you don't have the space, so basically downloading the entire United States topographical routable maps is about 9 gigabytes. If you have an older laptop that may not work so well, again, you can still download a couple states, and it's pretty easy. There's tutorials on how to do it, but the YouTube videos I find are just a lot easier. You basically just look up, how to install free maps on Garmin Basecamp. And for me, it really didn't take that much time. If anyone has a really hard time doing it and you can't find any YouTube videos that really make it clear, just email me, Michael at onpointpreparedness.net, and I can try to help you out. But again, I found it fairly easy. Now, I'm not 100% comfortable with the software. There's things that I probably still need to figure out for myself in terms of how to utilize it. But one of the first things that I just thought was, this would be awesome to have on a laptop. I do have some solar panels. You can also charge it via your cigarette lighter. This would be excellent to have in the car. Again, because of the breadth of what you're getting, right? So if you buy an Atlas map and it's like about that thick, they can only typically give you one type of resolution, right? So, they may give you this, or let's see here, they may be able to give you like this amount of resolution, and it's still a huge book. They're not going to be able to give you this resolution. I mean, if you combine every single one of those resolutions into some type of paper, atlas, it is going to be humongous, and it is going to be incredibly difficult to page through all that pagination. Here again, we have the same efficiencies as Google Maps, and we can go in and out very quickly and find our way through and get where we need to go. So that's really the primary thing that I wanted to show you guys. Again, Garmin Basecamp. Think about travel planning. One of the other things with travel planning that you need to think about is communication. So also having a communication plan with your family and what you're going to do there. But primarily, I did want to make you aware of this particular prep because I think it would be really helpful for you all. But it sounds like I've got some kids that are not in bed yet. They are knocking at the window. So I'm going to go ahead and address that. But hopefully you found some of this news update good and interesting. More importantly, that you found some of these preps interesting as well. So please don't hold off on some of the physical preps in terms of food and everything like that while it's still available. Just do what's in your means. Don't be fear-based. Just do something that's moderate, and be safe, everybody. God bless. Mike with On Point Preparedness. See ya.